One of the lead stories we had in the show, Nick Saban went off the rails a little bit and started ripping everybody, Deion Sanders, and started ripping Jimbo Fisher. And when anybody lashes out in life, that's why I don't take anything too personally on Twitter. When people lash out, there's three reasons psychologically why anybody lashes out: jealousy, envy, and fear. Now, I don't think Saban's jealous or envious of other coaches, but there's some fear here. Texas A&M kicked his butt in recruiting last year. It was the best recruiting class in the history of college football. They got 7 of the top 34 players. Texas was also top 5. Texas Tech for next year leads the country. Texas is a big boy economy. Alabama is not. Nick is now at a resource disadvantage. That's why he's suddenly chirping about parity, which he doesn't give two you-know-whats about. What he doesn't like is losing dominance. Texas has a lot more money and a lot more resources, and I'm here for it. I miss the Texas Longhorns being great. I've been told forever Texas A&M is going to be great. I'd like to see both. College football is better when Texas is fantastic. Any Texas school. I grew up with the Southwest Conference. Now, they all cheated, but nonetheless, it was fun. I don't think the SEC dominating the sport, I don't think it's going to end the sport. I don't think it's good for it. Ratings, attendance, down into the tubes. People out west don't sit around wanting to watch college football in the South all the time. Texas, we've got a connection to Texas. It's a quick, direct flight. A&M beat Bama last year. Nick knows he's had a oil, energy money disadvantage. Mario Cristobal is going to cut off some Miami recruiting. Lincoln Riley's already shut the door on some California recruiting. And Texas, good luck stealing the best players from Texas now with Jimbo Fisher, Steve Sarkisian, those facilities, and that oil money. And Nick knows it. He's no dummy. People lash out for 3 reasons: jealousy and envy, he's neither, and fear, he sees it. He's getting up there in age. These coaches are younger. Jimbo just beat him. They just hammered him in recruiting. Nick now came out yesterday and acknowledged he was a little over the top. The same system that allowed Nick to gray shirt kids 10 years ago, which most of the country thought was sleazy, but it was legal too. This is fear talking, and this is what it looks like. When people in power, he now doesn't control the players like he used to. They can transfer. He doesn't have the resources. And Alabama, according to his story, wants to pay all their players about $25,000 a year. That's cute. Quarterbacks now go for $1 million, the great ones. Defensive linemen have been going for $100,000 for years in the SEC. They just paid them through a church. Nick Saban had never lost to one of his assistants. He lost twice last year. Lane Kiffin building a power at Ole Miss, Sark at Texas, Jimbo at A&M, and Kirby Smart's got that puppy rolling at Georgia. Nick's getting older, a little less mobile, not as dominant. Players have power, money coming from different places. That is what fear looks like. Joey and I were talking about this during the break. About JJ Redick came out and rolled his eyes at, the old-time basketball players. Bob Cousy, and said, he's playing against, firemen and plumbers, and Cousy fired back. And the truth is, Cousy couldn't play in the NBA today. That's okay. Elgin Baylor probably could, and Wilt and Russell. But you and I were talking about this. A lot of the NBA, so again, I grew up watching it in the early 70s. I don't remember the 60s at all. I was a kid, like 5, 6 years old. But I do remember watching the Lakers against the Blazers. And I remember Wilt, West, and Gail Goodrich. I remember that in the early 70s. I don't know why I remember it. I was on my bunk bed as a kid, and the Lakers were on my black and white TV. I remember that. And I remember watching a lot of Miami Dolphins Super Bowl with Washington in 1972. I remember the Cincinnati Reds, 74, 75. I can name all the starting players. Those are the first, you never forget your first. I can remember vividly a lot. I can name starting lineups. John Goulet used to make fun of me. I can do it. All 70s baseball teams. And so, to me, who can play today and who can't? If you look at basketball in the 50s, 60s, and mostly the 70s, I grew up with the Sonics. They weren't vertical. Freddie Brown wasn't a jumper. Lonnie Shelton, John Johnson, Sigma, Marvin Webster could block shots. DJ was a little vertical. 7 guys in double figures. No great athletes. It was the same with the Portland Trailblazers. Sidney Wicks was a great athlete, but, Jeff Petrie, and, there was a lot of Dave Twardzik. It was very much, you had a back-to-the-basket big, a couple of rebounders, Maurice Lucas, and then you had a scoring guard and a small forward, and then you had a point guard who was a traditional pass first. And then you get to the late 70s and early 80s, and Dr. J emerged, and he didn't play like anybody. Don't ever listen to people that say Connie Hawkins and Dr. J are the same guy. No, they're not. Dr. J was a better ball handler. Dr. J was the first player I was like, wow. And then Dominique Wilkins came in the early 80s. Wow. And you started, guys had 45, 46-inch verticals. There was a kid named David Thompson that played at NC State. He was a very unique jumper. But then, so to me, the 50s, 60s, and most of the 70s, this is how basketball looked. It wasn't as, there were guys who could dunk. And then Dr. J and Dominique, 80s, 90s, 2000s, it mushes together for me. It's very vertical. A lot of guys one-handing stuff. Dr. J, Dominique, you had 6'9" point guards. People, like the Lakers didn't know what to do. Do you draft Magic Johnson? He's a 6'9" point guard. Bodies were changing. It was becoming a little less positionless, not positionless. And then there's the last 10 years of basketball. It's all threes. It's positionless basketball. It just doesn't matter. Luka would be a three. Now he's a point guard. LeBron,
look at KD.
Look at Kevin Durant. He can be a point. The last 10 years separates itself from the sort of mildly athletic 50s, 60s, and 70s to the first time you really watched guys it was crazy, slam dunk guys everywhere. And that's like late 70s, 80s, 90s, all the way to about 10 years ago. And then it's the positionless. I mean, Durant, LeBron, it doesn't matter.
Well, also the three-point shot changed the defensive side of the ball. You had to defend players differently.
Yeah, big guys have to go out and the perimeter.
You cannot be a defensive liability. You can't be that big guy with his feet in the mud, just rebounding and you going up against the other big. Like, you have to be able to go and guard the perimeter in some capacity, or you're going to see games like last night. Like, you have to be able to guard the three. You got to be more athletic, faster. Like, that part of the game has changed as well, not just the offensive side of the ball.
People get really offended. It's really funny. People, maybe because you and I have moved around a lot in our careers, so I'm not loyal to a town or a city or a team. I'm not loyal to it. People, I'll say, you're not from California. Why do you like the Trojans? Because they're aspirational, because they win national championships, because I grew up on Pac-12 football and nobody else can get great overnight like USC. Who cares where I'm from? 50% of LA is not from here.
Right. Okay,
who cares? Like, St. Louis is where you're born, raised, and never leave. The coasts are where you go for the money and the aspiration and the big stuff.
We're just more comfortable with change.
Yes, and so we both are. So when I don't know, I'm never offended by when people say, like, 60s guys couldn't compete today. Like, baseball people are so offended. Babe Ruth today would be a high school baseball player. He was 6'2", 220 with a gut.
Well, I think it comes across as an insult to what they accomplished and what they contributed to the sport, which I think that just depends on perspective. I would probably be insulted, but I can also take a step back and appreciate what was built and established by guys who played in those eras and the difference of the sport now. But this wouldn't exist. Like, it needed to develop. It needed to evolve. Things in society had to change to get to the space where we are with the game. Because it's not just the game. There's rehab that's changed. Surgeries have changed. Nutrition, travel. Like, there's more elements to why the game is looking and played the way that it is now as compared to the 50s and 60s.
Well, I mean, and also years ago, until about 15 years ago, players tapped out at 34.
Right.
Like, receivers couldn't run.
Yes.
Corners couldn't guard. Quarterbacks looked old. I mean, Warren Moon was an outlier. But now it's like, when people say, like, Matt Ryan's 38, he's getting old, and I'm almost disappointed in Matt Ryan. I'm like, Matt, you're only 38 years old. I mean, I look at now, people, executives. I just saw, what's the guy, Barry Diller? He's getting into gaming. He's like 80 years old. Like, people don't retire at 65. Like, there's executives all over America, entrepreneurs at 85 years old doing stuff. Rupert Murdoch, I don't know. So it's just, we eat better, the nutrition's better, we take care of ourselves, and so the careers last longer.
It's a little easier to watch film now than it was in the 60s.
Aaron Rodgers just doesn't want to watch it, but... Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.